Hey foodie friends, this is Jessica from Savory Experiments. Today we are making one of the most popular recipes on the blog. It is cube steak. Cube steak usually refers to the name of the actual dish, but it's actually the cut of meat that we use. When you see these at the grocery store, it probably looks like ground meat. It is either a top round or a top sirloin that's been tenderized through a commercial tenderizer, and the shape that it makes is little squares, and that's where it got the name cube steak. This helps break down fibers and tendons so that all it needs is a quick heat, a little bit of a sear, and it will be super tender, like talking take a fork and go like this. It's perfect. So let me show you how to make it. We're gonna start with a half a cup of flour, half a teaspoon of garlic powder, onion powder, fine sea salt, and ground pepper. Mix those together. I like using a shallow pie plate, one of my favorite kitchen tools, and I rarely even bake pies, but I use it for marinating and I use it for dredging. It's perfect for anything where you need a shallow dish, but a plate isn't big enough. So we're gonna take our steak and dredge it in the flour. Get it into all those little nooks and crannies. It's not gonna be a super crispy steak like a country fried steak, but it's gonna be just enough to give it a velvety texture. And the flour is also going to help thicken the gravy when we get to the part about making the sauce. Next, we're gonna add vegetable oil to a hot skillet. You want enough so that it doesn't stick and it coats the bottom, but you don't want so much that it pools. We're gonna add the beef to the hot skillet. So we're gonna cook these for 2 to 3 minutes on each side until they're well browned. After they're nicely browned on both sides, you're gonna remove the cube steaks to a plate and you're gonna set them aside while you make your gravy. The trick to this recipe and what makes it so unique is that we're not just using a plain brown gravy. We're gonna use a gravy that also has onions and mushrooms in it. You're gonna use the same skillet because this skillet has all these nice little brown bits in it that are like flavor bombs for your gravy. We are going to start with unsalted butter. So I use 2 tablespoons. I like unsalted because then you can control the salt in your sauce. So use everything that has the least amount of salt so you can add more later. You can always add more, but it's really hard to take saltiness away. So we're gonna melt the butter and we're gonna take up some of those little brown bits, the little brown flavor bombs on the bottom of your skillet. Let the butter melt, and when it does, add in half a white onion. Try to slice it pretty thin so that it cooks uniformly and easily. We're doing a sauté here, which is different than a caramelized onion. So we really wanna get a deep oniony flavor and taste out of the sauté. We're gonna do the same thing here with the mushrooms. The mushrooms, if they're giant ones, I just used white button mushrooms. You'll wanna cut them into 2 or 3 pieces. Go ahead and add those in. You can also use a mushroom blend if you wanna get super fancy with cube steak. Cook those for 2 to 3 minutes until they start to soften. So this was about 2 to 3 minutes. I like to make sure that my vegetables are soft, but I still want them to have a little bit of a toothy texture. It's what makes the gravy so unique. So next we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of dry brown gravy mix. You can get the packet at the grocery store, it's like 50 cents. You're gonna need a little less than 1 packet. You could also make this super easy at home yourself if you have dry beef bouillon. The recipe's on savoryexperiments.com in case you were wondering. We're gonna stir this in to the mushrooms and the onions, and it's gonna make a little bit of a paste, and that's fine. That is exactly what we were going for. It'll make it melt into the beef broth a little bit smoother so that you don't get any clumps, because the worst thing that can happen to gravy is clumps. And lastly, we have our low sodium beef broth. Just pour that in. It'll take 2 to 3 minutes on medium heat for this to heat up and to start to thicken a little bit. It's not gonna be a super thick cream gravy. It's gonna be thick enough to coat the back of a spoon. After the sauce is simmered for 2 to 3 minutes, it'll start to thicken. It's not fully thickened yet. The next step is to add the cube steak back to the gravy. The flour on the cube steak is also gonna help thicken it up just a little bit, and you want it to absorb some of that delicious gravy flavor. So get it in there and make sure that the gravy covers the cube steak. And we're gonna let it simmer for another 2 to 3 minutes so that all of the flavors have time to marry. So by now your gravy has thickened. It should be thick enough to coat the back of a spoon. You know your gravy's done when it starts to make a funny, globby, bubbly noise. It's all about the texture with gravies. It'll be a deep brown. So I like to serve mine over a nice plate of mashed potatoes. These have sour cream and onions in them because why not? So go ahead and plate up your cube steaks. Get a good amount of gravy on there, a lot of mushrooms, a lot of onions, and because it's so brown, I like to top mine with a little bit of chopped parsley. This is one of those really funny but easy ways to make your at-home meals seem a little bit more gourmet. Chop up a little curly parsley and put it on top. And now you feel like you're dining out. Fancy cube steak. From my kitchen to yours, have a great day.